Ladies and gentlemen, grab a drink. This is going to be a juicy, a beefy video. There's a lot of stuff I want to cover here. So, an Ask Me Anything was held with the Overwatch developers and some content creators. Now, this isn't public. It was all held behind closed doors. But there is a public AMA which is going to happen very soon, I believe, on the Overwatch Reddit. However, I was given the transcript for this. Now, I didn't take part in it because, frankly, I did have the chance to do it, but I fell asleep. So, take that however you want to take it. I'm being honest, I was literally asleep and I totally forgot about it. So I've not seen any of these questions and I've not seen any of these answers, but I thought it'd be really cool to show you guys what's gone on. Now, I have been told that they don't want any screenshots of these questions, but we can actually just go over them. So, hey, I don't know, bit weird. They're probably relating to screenshots to where these came from, but who even cares, right? We're just going to talk about these questions, go through them. We're going to react to them if we need to, but I want you guys to stay informed. So this is what happened, right? There were 52 questions asked. 35 of them were answered. Now, this is with Aaron Keller. Of course, the new game director took over from Jeff Kaplan, got massive shoes to fill. Jeff Goodman, he is the lead hero designer who designs all of the heroes and the balance in the game. And then Scott Mercer, who is basically in charge of competitive and that kind of system. And Dan Reed as well, who is from the workshop, and he's a legend. All right, then. Let's do this. Okay, let's get stuck into it. So first question. This was for Jeff Goodman. To properly add 5v5, are you going to revisit all the numbers of all the heroes, like damage, healing values, fire rates, ammos, cooldowns, etc.? And Jeff says, I think it's inevitable that 5v5 and other tank changes will necessitate that. The idea is that we keep the main gameplay and spirit of each character kit the same within reason, though some heroes will be going through much bigger changes than others. I think that's just, yeah, that's fair, right? It's going to 5v5 and all the tanks need changing. So, yeah. The next question, this was for Aaron Keller. Scoreboard stats overhaul when? And Aaron says, we're very grateful for all of your involvement in the community and the amazing work that you do. This was in response to the person that asked the question. We're looking at both scoreboard and stats reworks as part of our overhaul of many core systems in Overwatch 2. It's hard to really speak to the exact form that these will take, but our values have shifted a bit since launch. For instance, as a design group, we're not as committed to hiding individual teammates' individual stats during a match. So maybe we get to see here a little bit of a scoreboard added to the game, or maybe we can see other players' stats, their limbs, their, you know, we'll see. I guess that's what a scoreboard would be, right? But interesting. Jeff Goodman was asked, with Overwatch 2 featuring only one tank hero per team instead of two, is there concern that this new format will place tremendous pressure on the solo tank player during the match and potentially make the role even less appealing to play than it currently is? And the answer is yes, for sure that's a concern. The hope is that the new power level and flexibility of tanks and the gameplay changes to allow them to be more aggressive, do more damage, etc. will offset that. It is certainly something we've talked a lot through. Then Dan Reed was asked the question. Of course, he's the workshop engineer. With Overwatch 2 turning to 5v5, does that mean the current workshop extension system will now have more points available by default, as there is more memory available with two characters gone? And the answer was, it's still too early to tell what the implications for the workshop extension system might be, but it would be awesome if it worked like that, what you're suggesting. Scott Mercer was asked, apparently this question has been paraphrased. Are we looking to revamp the daily reward and progression systems within Overwatch 2? Other games use things like daily login rewards, missions, battle passes to help with retention, and drive login. The answer, yes, but we don't have much in the way of details to go over at this time. I will say that I am not as much designing around retention concerns, but trying to make competitive systems more fun and helpful for players who want to try and improve their Overwatch skills over time while competing matches that are fair and balanced. Yeah, like, so you can already kind of see that some of the answers so far are kind of a bit PR-y. We can't tell you about this, but we like that idea. You'll see a lot of that kind of speak, I guess, through this. They get put through PR training, which is like, if you ask somebody a question and it's a really shit question, they'll say to you as a like, if I say, I think 5v5 is absolutely trash. What have you been doing for the last 2 years? And that was my question. They'd respond with, I really hear what you're saying. That'd be the first line. but we don't have much more details to give you at the moment. That kind of stuff, right? So there's probably going to be a bunch of that here, but yeah. Take that with a pinch of salt. There may be some gems in this. I mean, I hope there is. So Jeff Goodman was asked, what is the impact of the tank in 5v5? In 6v6, we feel like the main tank is too strong, and when it dies, the fight is almost over. In 5v5, it feels like the same as losing... Does it feel the same, sorry, as losing the main tank in 6v6? And the answer was, yeah, that aspect hasn't really changed in 5v5, though tanks are more survivable in general, so they are harder to burn down quickly. Also, with their new role passives and possibly other crowd control reductions across the board, that also helps them survive and not just be CC'd until they die. I'd say so far our bigger concern is making sure non-tanks don't die too easily now, especially versus snipers, etc. This is something we need to be careful with. So this is the first good answer, an angle question. Yeah, so snipers are a problem. You could kind of tell that from the gameplay footage we got to see on the stream. There's just massive sight lines everywhere. There isn't the other tank to go and harass the other, like a sniper. They can just sit in the background. Widow, is it going to be a sniper's paradise? Yeah. What about Hanzo? Yeah, there's all these things are going to be issues, but at least they know that and they're looking at maybe trying to fix it. But also, when the tank dies, there's pretty much an admission here that, yeah, the fight's probably over. So maybe we just go into Overwatch 2 where all you ever do is focus the tank and that's kind of it. But hey, the tank's got abilities, right? And the supports are there to keep the tanks alive. So we'll see how that plays out. Scott Mercer was asked, will seasons change to be more meaningful? Again, another good question. The answer, yes. That's something we're looking at from the ground up. How long are they? What's the role of placements? How do we make the middle of the season as exciting as the beginning and the end? What is the role of the rewards in all of this? Is there a way to make Season X feel different than Season Y so you can remember and celebrate them more? A lot is on the table. All right, so again, there's no answer here as to how things might change, but it's pretty much saying, yeah, look, we're working on this and we're going to do something about it. And yeah, thank God for this. This needs to happen. No one cares about seasons in Overwatch. They're not impactful. They don't have any kind of meaning, really. Who cares? In fact, I'd argue the only seasons that matter were probably like Season 1 and 2, because if you got top 500 then, that's kind of like an amazing achievement back in the day. If you're playing in Season 580 or whatever it is now, but Season 23 or whatever, who cares about that season, yeah? So, good stuff that they're looking at it, though. Jeff Goodman was asked, will it behave the same across the board? I saw overhealth on Hammond still not grant ult charge in the playtest. I may be mistaken on this, but Doomfist did. Also, when Torp used Overload, will his green health still have armor properties? And the answer was, yeah, I should have been more clear on this one in the stream, I think. The green health acts just like normal health. So anyone who was able to give over armor, Brig, is just weaker in this system. We'll have to compensate for this as needed. As far as Wrecking Ball, right now, he still has that passive part of his overhealth not granting ult. But honestly, we might just remove that now that the tank passives are already providing ult reduction for the attackers. Aaron Keller was asked, what topic was the most heated debate within the devs when making Overwatch 2? And the answer was this. There have been a few. Scoreboard, which I just addressed earlier, has been a very controversial topic since work on the original game began. We also really struggled with 2CP. We put a lot of time into trying to address its various problems. A lot of us, including me, are fans of the mode when it's working correctly. Some of my favourite Overwatch matches are in 2CP. It requires such a high degree of coordination on a team. When a match is close, it feels so good, but when it's not, well, we've seen how people react. I think the fundamental problem with this mode is that the percentage of great matches to matches with problems just isn't high enough. And as a design team, we weren't able to figure out how to fix it. We tried just about every suggestion that we saw online too. It was very difficult to let go Assault. Did I just call it 2CP? Oops. That's the exciting thing, that we have some really great maps and modes to replace it. What's interesting there is an admission that they weren't able to fix something. And you very rarely see that from Blizzard, like, oh, this was bad and we didn't know how to fix it, and we tried even what you guys were suggesting and it didn't work. But yeah, 2CP saying that was the problem. One of the most, I don't know, like, again, like, I don't really know how he could answer that any differently, I guess. It's a bit of a broad question, but yeah, it's a PR response. That's what you'd expect to see on like PC Gamer interview or whatever. All right, let's carry on. So this was Jeff Goodman. Do you have any thoughts on how the current ult economy of Overwatch is compared to 1 year after launch? Okay, so the answer to this is we've actually reduced ult gain a few times in the past, both on multiple specific heroes and also across the board. It's pretty decent right now, I think, but it's pretty easy to adjust further if needed. We've been talking lately about looking at ults that feel kind of cheap and maybe adding more reasonable counterplay. For example, Pharah can basically blow somebody up nearly instantly, but she usually dies for it. It might be more healthy if it wasn't so suicidal to use, but maybe gave it a bit more warning somehow to the enemy as well. Though I still love the high potential of an ult like that, so we'd want to keep it high risk, high reward. Yeah, like, I don't know. Like, again, that's a fairly decent answer, but I guess like the thing with Overwatch 2 is with Pharah, if you had Zarya, you could bubble her twice. That actually might be pretty good. Like, I don't know. So Aaron Keller was asked a question here. How did you test 5v5's impact on queue times, and can share how it helped? And can you share how it helped, I guess? And the answer is, testing isn't quite the right phrase here. We ran simulations, a lot of simulations. We have data on how players have queued for every match of Overwatch and use that to run these. It's tough to talk about the results of these though. On the one hand, yes, it looks like 5v5 will reduce queue times, but human psychology plays a factor here. It's very difficult to know how many people queue for a particular role because they enjoy it or because they dislike queue times. As DPS queues go down, is there a hidden group of people that have always wanted to play that role that might start queuing into it? This gets to the core of Overwatch and its trickiest problem. Our game promotes a fantasy to be able to pick from the wide variety of amazing heroes. People aligned with different heroes and roles in the game tend to prefer those. The majority of people tend to prefer clicking on heads. It's the way that they have fun in the game that they enjoy playing. You can see that there's a fundamental issue here. The community seems to be aligned that Overwatch is in a balanced place right now, but most of our players don't want to engage in the game that way. That's really interesting. That is really interesting. Hold on, let me read that again, because I think that's an admission of falling player numbers there. Let's just go through this again. The community seems to be aligned that Overwatch is in a balanced place right now, but most of our players don't want to engage in the game that way. Yeah. Yeah, because what he's saying there is like, hey, everyone says the game's balanced, but nobody's playing it. I think they probably would if there was just content. That's the joke of Overwatch, isn't it? It's like, Anyway, let's move on. Many of them are willing to wait for queue times in excess of 30 minutes in order to play DPS because they love doing that. It's a very tricky problem to solve as a development team. Sorry for the book. I'm going a little slow. Maybe I'm writing too much. Okay. Scott Mercer. Alt accounts ruin quick play, matchmaking, smurf low ranks, any fixes, cell phone verification, reasons people feel they have to get ults, too hard to play with friends, off-roll SR doesn't really work accurately. Okay, and the answer from Scott is this. Good question about alt accounts. We'll be tackling this in different ways. One of the primary avenues we're looking at is trying to give the matchmaker more tools for determining your skill more accurately and faster. We want to better identify people repeatedly abusing alt accounts and action them appropriately. We're also looking at how easy it is to make these accounts. All that being said, there are legitimate reasons for players to potentially use a few accounts, so we have to balance those needs against players who frivolously even abuse the system. Okay, interesting. So he ignored most of that question, because a lot of that question there is just like straight up like, anyway, let's move on. Wow, okay, sorry. I had to go and get a drink because I was actually choking up. And you know what? I'm going to take a swig of it again now. Oh, my Lord. Yeah, I need some water. Oh, my God. Yeah, so I think the problem with that question is I know the developers, and I also know just like anyone, if you're asking them questions, you don't just make straight up assumptions like coming at them going, alt accounts have ruined the game, off-roll SR doesn't work and all this. It's like, okay, there are opinions you can have, and it's fine to have that opinion. But when you just hit somebody with that and it's the person that has designed those systems, they're probably not going to respond to your question. And I think that's what's happened there. All right, let's move on. So Jeff Goodman, he was asked, are there concept, hero ideas, ability interactions you can explore once the game goes 5v5 that you can't while the game is 6v6? A good question, this one. And the answer is, this is a great question. I said it was a good question. I think the biggest thing is it allows us to be more free in how we design tanks. In the past, it was always like, how do we make a new barrier tank that is different but still interesting? And also, isn't super annoying to play it against tanks, which can be a struggle. In a world where tanks are allowed to do more damage and dive into groups of enemies, it opens up a lot more opportunity for new tanks and the ways they can work. Rhine's barrier isn't going away. We're just focused on lowering its overall uptime so barriers don't feel mandatory all the time. Now, I like this because this is a question. This actually is a really good answer, because what he's saying is we don't like barriers in Overwatch, really. We want to reduce the numbers of barriers. So if we've just got one tank, well, we've reduced the number of barriers. And let's be honest, guys, firing into a barrier is bloody crap. It's really bad. It's bad design, to be honest, on the part of Overwatch. It's not engaging. You don't want to do it. You want to shoot characters. You want to shoot people. Not just a barrier which disappears then just comes back. It's like, what the hell? It's crap. You don't get any reward for that. So it's nice to see that. And yeah, you can see the design change there with the tanks, like making them more go into the fight. But then the question becomes like, is every tank just a dive tank now, effectively, right? Just some have got vertical movement and some haven't. It's an interesting debate. And again, we're going to have to wait for answers to this. But I think that's a pretty good, that's a good answer. It's a good question and a good answer. Aaron Keller was asked, is it possible to test the 5v5 on experimental card in Overwatch 1 to give you massive feedback about it? And there was a comment from a community manager which said, keep in mind that this change is a bit more than just removing one hero, and a lot of other hero adjustments are taking place simultaneously. So preparing an experimental mode like this is a huge undertaking and may not be feasible. And the answer from Aaron says, anything's possible, but the question is timeline and how much work it is. If we are able to get testing for this, it wouldn't be on the experimental card. So he's basically saying, if we do testing for this, it will be some sort of like closed beta or something, which, yeah, fine. I mean, there's obviously already a version of that floating around because how the developers play with each other. You know, because they're all working from home. Yeah, like these are things which we're not going to get access to this because it's not a finished product and it would damage Overwatch 2 long term. And whatever. But yeah, I do believe, though, that there is I think there's a workshop mode that does try to emulate 5v5. Now, obviously, it's not going to be accurate, but it'll give you an idea of sort of the way it plays. And especially, I think they changed Reinhardt and they did a bunch of other changes. So yeah, just check Google for that. You can probably find it quite easily. Jeff Goodman was asked, is it safe to say that tanks are truly intended to be a different class in Overwatch 2? As in, off-main tanks may not be the terms and brawler is. Many are afraid D.Va, Zarya, Hog would never compete with Ryan or Winston, level of play depending. How can 5v5 be balanced to ensure some heroes aren't unpickable, level of play depending? And the answer is, yeah, brawler's a great term. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna hijack the question here, the response from Jeff a little bit. Brawler was something they spoke about, I think, in the BlizzCon Online, right? I'm sure Jeff Kaplan spoke about this. Tanks becoming more brawlers, maybe they become brawlers. So yeah, anyway, the answer from Jeff Goodman is, yeah, brawler's a great term. In fact, we've gone so far as to consider changing the name and icon of the category away from tank and into something like brawler, which is something we still might do. It's hard to imagine picking a solo Hog versus a solo Ryan right now, but you have to imagine this in a world where everything is changed from what we have now. As far as making sure some heroes are unpickable, this will be something that we are constantly balancing as we go, much like how we're doing it on live right now. So yeah, you know, again, that's viewing what we've seen in Overwatch 2 through the lens of Overwatch 1, but you really have to understand, this would be me speaking to the devs here, you've really got to understand this is all the community can base their point of view from. Like, it's no good showing them something, going, oh yeah, but you know, it's going to be totally different, don't worry about it. They can't experience it, right? So there is that disconnect, and that's always going to be an issue. But yeah, that was a pretty decent answer. Scott Mercer was asked, is there any desire internally for an in-game tournament system? I like this question because this is what I would have asked. Is there a desire for an in-game tournament system? Yes, there absolutely is a desire to implement in-game tournaments, but we also want to make a lot of improvements to larger elements of competitive play first. So I sadly wouldn't expect to see such a system for quite a while. but how they would fit into Overwatch 2's larger competitive play ecosystem is something I'm keeping in mind as we work on Overwatch 2. Okay, so they want it. They're maybe going to do it, but it's going to be a long, long way away. Okay. Jeff Goodman was asked, are barriers and their prominence within both the tank role and the game overall being reevaluated in Overwatch 2, given that there will now be only one tank hero per team? And the answer is yes. That is one of the main wins from moving to one tank. Though, this does not mean that Ryan's shield is going to be stronger to compensate for having or for not having another tank. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We're pushing the tank role away from barriers being too dominant and trying to allow tanks to get into the mix more, dealing damage, etc. This also means everyone in the game is shooting barriers a lot less overall. So this is fairly similar to a question that was asked earlier on, but remember, these questions I think were over like an hour period, so I guess people just came in and typed their questions or whatever and then went away, and then maybe they got asked to the devs and maybe they didn't. But yeah, again, saying, look, less barriers in the game, we don't like barriers, which is fair enough. Scott Mercer was asked, we know that the PvP is the basis of Overwatch, and with the release of Overwatch 2, the options with PvE will open. Will there be specific rewards or goals to achieve within these two modes? That is to say, not only achievements that we take for granted that there will be, but for example, costumes for the exclusive characters of each mode. Okay, and the answer to this is a good question about achievement rewards in PvE and PvP, and the simple honest answer is we don't really know yet. But to clarify one thing, all the heroes in Overwatch 2 are going to be playable in both PvE and PvP. Aaron Keller was asked, over the years, do you think that anything was lost in Overwatch? A certain feel, a certain goal, a certain philosophy? And is there something that you're hoping to return or reinvigorate with Overwatch 2? And the answer is, oh boy, here we go. I'm probably going to stir up more here than I ought to. Oh, okay, maybe this is a spicy one. But yes, I do. The promise of Overwatch is to play anyone from this incredibly diverse set of heroes. If you remember Overwatch pre-launch, there was no hero limits. There was something magical about being able to jump into the game, pick any hero that you wanted, and then just start playing. As the game progressed, more and more problems were encountered with this design. As a team, we didn't feel like we would ever be able to solve this problem without drastically watering down individual heroes' gameplay. I think we made the right decision, but there are still times when I see people remembering this period fondly or even asking for it back. I understand the sentiment, but we felt like the right decision for the game was to try to keep what we felt was the essence of Overwatch gameplay. Heroes with amazing abilities working together for a common objective while pivoting on a feature while fun, but a host of problems that we might not be able... Okay, that's not even... Okay, I was expecting some spice there. There was no spice. Whatever, we move on. We move on. Jeff Goodman answering the question. After a huge experimental 1-3-2 test, you guys talked about the reason you didn't go with one tank. For example, it was too much pressure for some players who like to work with an off tank. Can we expect some old school 6v6 modes somewhere in the game? Good question, because I know a lot of people have been asking me this, and I know a lot of people kind of want this because maybe you've got 6 people who play together, and that won't be able to happen in Overwatch 5v5. You what, please? All right, let's go. The answer is maybe it's an unknown right now. Some things to keep in mind though. A lot of the game is going to change around the idea of there being only one tank, especially in regards to hero design and balance. This means if we did keep 6v6 mode around, it wouldn't really even feel like it does right now on live, and might not be super competitive. There might be super degenerate strats, etc. There's always degenerate strats, don't worry about that. This doesn't mean we for sure won't support the options somewhere somehow, but it makes it unlikely we'll have a competitive queue for it of some kind. Okay, yeah, so maybe not. We don't really know. Aaron Keller was asked, do you think that in order to successfully introduce fundamental changes in PvP, revisiting current maps might be a necessity? Like this. Answer. I'll answer the question in reference to 5v5 rather than just from a theory perspective. Possibly. Most of the space in our maps work well for 5v5 from a size or square footage standpoint. A lot of our metrics deal with how heroes feel in certain spaces and what an objective is rather than how many players are in a particular area. One of the interesting things to come from 5v5 is that players tend to use the environment more for cover than they did previously. This is an important skill in any shooter, and it's a little more prevalent in 5v5 than 6v6. The mods that could potentially be made to some of the older maps are very discreet and probably rare extra pieces of cover for players to use. Imagine one extra phone booth in the streets of King's Row. I mean, come on, Aaron, it's a telephone box, mate. It's you built the map. You built the map, man. But here we go, right? So Aaron, I mean, I kind of laughed a little bit at the live presentation for Monte Carlo, where I think it was Aaron was talking a lot about the steps and how they're not very steep in Overwatch, and it went on a bit too long, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? You got to remember, that's what Aaron is. He's the map designer. So map designer, he wants to talk about the map, right? So yeah, I didn't particularly find that too interesting, but hey, whatever. That answer, yeah, maybe they're going to change some of the older maps. Maybe they won't. I don't know. So Scott Mercer was asked, with how fast the game is balanced, players often can't play enough to accurately get rated, while the heroes they play get adjusted wildly patch to patch. Is there some ways ranks can adjust to this world with more flexible systems to display and earn your rank? Soft resets on seasons, more visibly showing career peak while making it fun, earning in season perhaps? And the answer, we're definitely looking at ways to improving our matchmakers' view of skill in the game. And as you noted, there are challenges based on what the heroes and roles of players play. How much, how often meta shifts, balance changes, etc. Any value of SR is also relative to the overall skill of the current population of players, and the entire player base improves over time. So we're looking at possible SR decay systems. If you come back and play Overwatch after taking a break, we don't want your experience to be getting stomped for a bunch of games because your SR is no longer calibrated well. There's also other possibilities we're considering for Overwatch 2 competitive, but I can't talk about them. Yeah, all right, so I think decay would be good, obviously, because, I mean, I've got accounts that I could, like, I've not, well, okay, so here's a good example. I've not played Overwatch comp for quite a while. You guys know I've not been very well. I've had a whole host of other things going on as well. But if I was to jump into comp now on one of my accounts and just, so Spitfire, right? This is an account I had this account before, even there was an Overwatch League team that nicked my name. But yeah, if I jumped onto that account and logged into support, I think it was GM. I'm pretty sure that account was GM last time I played it. I can tell you right now, I will not be GM. I will literally throw the games because I need to get back into the flow of things. So on that account, yeah, I should probably have been decayed down to God knows where. So I'm going to create better games, right, and not throw games. And yeah, so it's good that at least that's being considered and at least they're talking about it. So a question for Jeff Goodman. In 5v5, can you elaborate more of the change of gameplay for DPS and supports? In 6v6, easily hitting 2 tanks gives a sense of lots of uptime and interactions, whereas in 5v5, shooter elements feel more forefront. It was noted that Anna dealt 110 damage with an attack. What are the goals and direction to keep DPS and supports fun where there's one tank to easily interact with? Okay, so Jeff Goodman's answer is, I assume you mean with one less target to heal damage and only one tank. The concern is that everyone now just focused on the one target and target selection becomes less interesting. So far in our playtest, the game has shifted more towards trying to work around the tank more, either by flanks or just finding firing angles around them. Of course, the tanks can apply pressure and make sure you can't just free fire. If anything, I'd say the opposite feels more true right now, where you suddenly have a lot more opportunities to try and get picks on other targets, and their healers are scrambling to keep everyone alive. A concern I'm overall hearing a lot is how tanks are just going to be focused and die very quickly. But so far with our tuning and playtesting, that hasn't really been the case, in part because we've just made them tankier, more health, etc. But also because there is one less enemy firing at them. I think I said this earlier, but at least right now, our big concern is the pick specialist heroes like snipers might be just too good right now without all of the barriers to stop them. Good answer there. So, I mean, again, you can see that they're talking about this issue of snipers, and it seems that this is a big issue they've got right now. How do you stop snipers from dominating in a game that has less barriers? Because barriers, that was the way they kept the snipers in check. And of course, we see Sigma throwing barriers into the face of a Widow. You can't do nothing, right? But even just beyond that, it becomes difficult to fire into masses of players when they're all hiding behind barriers. But with 5v5 and the way the maps are made for Overwatch 2, players are more spread out. This means it's easier for snipers to hit people. This is going to be one to keep an eye on, I think. Jeff Goodman was asked, has there been any consideration for swapping characters from categories? Mei to tank, Zarya to DPS. Especially with the brawler potential, it would make more sense, in my opinion, that Zarya would be a DPS over brawler, for example. And the answer is, we haven't done any hard swaps internally yet. And that is in italics, and it is like, we ain't done it yet, but we're going to do it. But it is certainly still on the table. It's one of the list of experiments to try internally. Sim to support again, etc. Sim back to support? Oh, Lord. I mean, again, like they're not saying this is set in stone, right? They're just saying they're still doing testing on this. And again, that should show you guys how far away this game is from completion, really, which has always been an issue I've had with it because, I mean, hell, I asked them on the stream, like, hey, Toronto, I was expecting a radically different map. It looked the same as it looked like nearly 3 years ago. You know, it's like, okay. Anyway, let's move on. Aaron Keller was asked a question. Is there any chance that the 2CP Assault map assets get remastered into a new game mode, a hybrid game mode for Hanamura, for example? And the answer to this is maybe, but it would have to be very specific, be a very specific mode. So I don't have any ideas how that could work currently, or without so much rework that it would probably be better to build a new map. Remember that all maps in Overwatch only work for a specific mode. I don't know why I just said that. You obviously know. To place a pay, he said, you know, I know why he said that. It's because he's in like PR mode. You gotta let loose. To place a payload path on the second half of Hanamura would be tough. Payloads need a certain amount of space to move through the environment. There isn't enough in that map, and there isn't enough space in some of the areas to really take a stand and try and defend it. The area just in front of the dojo is designed as a transition space rather than a place for large team fights. The second half of the map also isn't large enough to have 2 full checkpoints worth of payloads. There's been other suggestions for 2CP, like adding a third point between the first two, but it runs into a similar problem. Namely, that those areas in the maps aren't designed to be defended very easily. They exist mainly as a skirmish space and an avenue to give flow route opportunities to the offense. Also, we did try adding a third point internally. I think it was in Volskaya, though. Okay. He's still there, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're powering through. So a question for Aaron Keller. Do you have any plans to add more social features in Overwatch 2? Like customizable players' profiles with bio, favorite heroes, or ways to find players, make friends, especially from the same country or city. Right now, players can do that outside of the game, but I'd prefer to have a cool tool in the game to do it. Nice question. Yeah, because like we want guilds and all that stuff. Like we kind of know guilds sort of got leaked from the Overwatch 2 stuff. But anyway, we'll crack on with the answer. So the answer is yes. We would like to add more social features for Overwatch 2. Some are fairly large in scope and some are smaller. I like the ideas that you suggested, and a smiley face. Yep, I'm pretty sure that in fact, I think I know they're making a guild system because we've seen the leaks. The leaks were there from the Overwatch BlizzCon Online thing, and they forgot to basically cover over the bit where it said guild underneath, or I think it said clan underneath the player name. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So a question for Scott Mercer. Remember, Scott Mercer is the guy who does competitive. Aaron Keller is the game director with a specialization in maps, and Jeff Goodman is the hero designer, and also balance of the game, obviously. So Scott Mercer was asked, do you think people's SR shifts fast enough over the course of the seasons? Season to season, patches and strength of heroes can shift quite drastically, whereas people's SR can be cramped quite easily, even if they don't match the new state of the game. Do you see this as a problem, or do you guys not see it that way? And the answer, that's a tough question to answer, because context matters a great deal here. A tremendous number of players play, learn, reach their appropriate skill level, and then their skill level doesn't change much at all, because they are playing just for fun and enjoyment instead of playing with purpose and a plan to try and improve. That's right, you always need a plan. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the plan? All that being said, since SR is relative to the large population, how their personal skill level translates into SR can change over time. That's one of the reasons we're looking at implementing a system like SR Decay. So yeah, again, he's just... The main thing to take away from that is, again, he's saying about SR Decay. So I think that's what we're going to see in Overwatch 2. Maybe we see that before Overwatch 2. I don't know. But yeah, stay tuned to that. And also remember to drink. Because apparently I've done so much talking in the last few days, I can't actually talk anymore. Okay, all right, cool. Jeff Goodman was asked, how much is it a focus when it comes to the average engagement duration? Early Overwatch felt a lot faster overall. So I'm not sure if balance over time was conscious choice to move towards slower or not. And the answer. A lot of this comes from a bit of healing creep, where heal per second has crept up slowly over time. We've tried to address this a little bit over the last year or so for live, but it's going to need a full revisit for 5v5. As you could see from the stream, sometimes engagements last super long right now, especially if both teams are focused on bringing the tanks down, which can be pretty hard right now. Our goal is to keep them reasonably fast and not have them feel like they're dragging on. But we also don't want to lean on damage spikes, snipers, nades, ults, etc. to create this. It's a tricky problem because we've already done one experiment where we've reduced healing a bunch across the board to playtest it. And even if the game overall flows better, it feels really bad to play a healer, especially when trying to heal your tank. So we don't want to go that route. I think this is definitely something we're this is definitely something we're talking about all the time though. Oh, interesting. That was funky. Aaron Keller was asked, any plans that we can learn about and then a strike through for multiplayer going free to play, a support creator program, and the community manager came in and said we're not discussing business model, and then Aaron Keller came in and said I think programs like this are interesting, but as a feature they're not something that I had much exposure to before taking on this role, so this might be better suited for one of the other devs or community members. Not trying to dodge, I just want what, ask a community member. Yeah, of course they're going to say give us support a creator system. Do you know how much money they make off these systems? Anyway, let's move on. So Josh, who is one of the community managers, responded again and said, we are interested in a creator program, but a lot of thought towards what it might look like requires a ton of different teams to make it work and make it work right. If you ever have any thoughts on what makes a successful partner program, I'm all ears. I can't guarantee anything, but we're always interested in finding new ways to support content creators. So, PR, great PR response. Okay, let's move on. Scott Mercer, he was asked, do you see flex queue priority passes as systems that will be passed through Overwatch 2, or do you plan to change and evolve them? I ask as anecdotally, I feel like whenever I get flex queuers in my game, they tend to perform worse than a player who specializes in the role. Are you happy with what those systems are outputting, or is there more that can be done with them? This is a great question. The answer is, we plan on keeping the system as it has helped with queue times. We're always looking for ways to decrease queue times. The system will continue to see adjustments behind the scenes as we tune how it works. As far as people flexing tend to be worse than those playing who specialize, while that might be true for many people, do remember that they have separate SRs for each role and they use the appropriate SR for that role they're playing. Yep. So that is fine, but yeah, you know, that's what the SR system is supposed to be there for, right? So I don't know. I like that question. The answer, yeah, I kind of like the answer as well. Okay. All right, next up, we've got Aaron Keller. So Aaron was asked. Aaron said, we felt like the right decision for the game was to try to keep what we felt was the essence of Overwatch gameplay, heroes with amazing abilities working together for a common objective, while pivoting on a feature that, while fun, brought with it a host of problems that might not be able to ever solve. Is this how the team now feels about having two tanks as well? That while it brings up great things, it creates problems they can't solve, and 5v5 will free up the game more. And Aaron says, I probably should have expected this as a follow-up and had an expertly crafted response ready to paste in, but you're going to have to wait for me to type it. I think so. It's difficult to deal with problems like this from a purely mechanical perspective. because it doesn't really get to the root of the problem. Role queue is probably a more appropriate comparison to 5v5. It was hard to balance the game properly, especially for all skill levels without it. At the same time that people were running GOATs and there were teams of 4 or 5 DPS and comp queues, human preference and psychology can't always be solved with the balance patch. Okay, we've seen him mention that before, and I remember Jeff ages ago, Jeff Kaplan, that is, talking about, in fact, didn't he make a dev update saying please don't be nasty to each other and don't be toxic? So they've always had this issue with human psychology and whatever in the game. Still, there probably is ways of designing around that. But hey, who knows? The next question we've got is, I believe this is okay. So this one's answered by a community manager, so not a developer. And the question is, are there any more details available about the format frequency of future developer updates, and when, if ever, they'll be returning to the Blizz office? And the answer is, we're committed to be... See what I mean? Like, that when you go to the school of PR, like, we're committed to being more... Like, we hear you. We get what you're saying. Like, those responses, you know you're going to get a PR response when you see that. So here it comes. We're committed to being more communicative this year about Overwatch and Overwatch 2. While I wish I could say once a month, etc., I just can't make that guarantee right now. We'll definitely try to keep them coming frequently, with a hopeful goal of releasing one per month, or at least every other month. I wish I could tell you about recording in the office. We're still working from home right now. Jeff Goodman, he was asked, I was told recently when asking about Immortality Field that the team feels as if it gatekeeps specific compositions. Now, with 5v5 announced, do you feel an ability like that is still necessary? Personally, I would like to see fewer abilities like this that negate plays in Overwatch 2 and more abilities that emphasize each player's playmaking instead. Overwatch is the most fun when there is plays like like chess, but Immortality Field makes it feel like checkers. Does the team feel like an ability which constantly counters ultimates on a cooldown is balanced? And I'm just going to take a drink. Man, I don't know. Like, this is like 40 minutes long, and I've been doing a lot of talking, but my voice is destroyed. What? And the answer to this is, we often hear the other side of the coin as well. That ultimates just feel like a I win button. Diva eating Grav is another example that has been around a while, as well as Anna sleeping a Winston or Genji, etc. Granted, those are a bit more narrow and generally harder to pull off. Maybe Immortality is too good right now, but I also don't like the idea of going so far as to remove these kinds of interactions, as they feel like they help keep ults in check and make you think about if and when to ult a lot more. I don't know. I think like Immortality Field's always going to be an issue because it just stops you from dying, and that's really good in any game. It's like Mercy's Resurrect. You know, think of the original version of that. Res the entire team. It took Blizzard a long time to go, how do we actually make Res good? How do we make Res a skillful ability? And they did, and Res is still a good ability and it's still strong. But the thing with Immortality Field is it's for everybody. Again, it's the idea of it's a whole area of immortality. What happens if it was a drone that just connected to a target when you fired at? So you go down the same path as Mercy, where you just resing one target, but instead the drone actually flies towards a target and gives them the same effect as you get right now, but the drone can still be destroyed. Could that work? Any fans of R-Type out there? If anybody actually knows what R-Type is, then you kind of know what I'm trying to say with like the drone thing on the front of your ship. That it's invincible. Anyway, no, maybe it's completely different. I don't know why I've got R-Type on the brain. I've lost it, ladies and gentlemen. I've actually lost it. What is in this water? Okay, Scott Mercer was asked. We're nearly at the end now. Anyway, guys. I know Jeff Kaplan was against the idea of gold guns from the beginning. However, is there any plans to add more competitive rewards in Overwatch 2? For example, diamond weapons. The answer was there are going to be additional rewards. Are there going to be additional rewards in the style of golden weapons for Overwatch 2? At this point, I have to say they're unlikely. Kaplan and I discussed this quite extensively, and we both agree that there aren't really necessary going forward. People play competitive for a lot of reasons. They might enjoy the game mode, the serious nature of comp, or want to play more and improve their skill to become better players. Golden guns are pretty far down the list. I say all that, but there might be some other systems that act as rewards for playing competitively in Overwatch 2, but we're not ready to discuss them because they're still in development. Okay. Aaron Keller was asked, do you see Workshop as a significant part of Overwatch and Overwatch 2's future? And the answer is, I love the Workshop and some of the amazing things that people do with it. The relevance of this particular feature isn't entirely controlled by the development team, although I realise we are the gatekeepers of features and the ones that enable it. As creators make cooler content, the Workshop becomes more popular and more significant. To that end, we have had discussions of different ways of enabling creators to expand on their visions. And the final question, I believe this was answered by somebody from Blizzard PR. So the question was, are there plans for LGBTQ plus pride-related in-game content, whether it's socials like profile pictures or in-game skins and rewards? And the answer was, we have some LGBTQ plus pride content coming. I can't share it, but we do have something coming. Okay, so bit of a tease there. All right then, guys. So that is the Q&A that was held, or the Ask Me Anything, whatever you want to call it, with the Overwatch developers and certain community content creators. So I think YouTubers, streamers. I didn't read any of their names out simply because I don't want, like, it's up to them if they want to say it's them who's made the comment, right? You know, obviously reading the devs' names out before we answer the question makes sense. So yeah, let me think, or rather let me know what you think about that. As for what I think about the whole thing, I think it was okay. I don't think much was discussed there. I think major takeaways are kind of like, they don't like barriers, so that's maybe one of the reasons we're going 5v5. They also like the fact having one less tank makes the game easier to balance. Symmetra may move to a support, but that's just an example, and there's a bunch of other heroes that might move around categories. Maybe they rename tank to brawler is another one. And yeah, apart from that, I don't know, not mind-blowing stuff, but yeah. All right, guys, thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, then yeah, do let me know in the comments below. Also as well, if you are on TikTok, go and follow me. I'm really close to 10,000 followers on TikTok. And if you can follow, that would actually help me. I'm at Stylosa UL for unit loss, because I can't get Stylosa because apparently somebody's called Stylosa on there, whatever. But go to at Stylosa UL on TikTok, and I think there's a link in the video description as well, and check that out. All right, guys, I'm going to go away because I literally cannot talk anymore. My voice is destroyed, and I'll catch you on the next one. Toodaloo.